It was supposed to be a peaceful afternoon. One of those rare, sunny days when the air felt crisp but not too cold. The kind of day that made the park a perfect place to spend time with my baby. The stroller rolled smoothly over the concrete path as I pushed it along, enjoying the warmth of the sun on my skin while my baby cooed softly, her chubby hands reaching toward the sky. The playground was alive with laughter, the scent of fresh-cut grass mixing with the distant aroma of grilled hot dogs from a nearby vendor. And for a moment, I allowed myself to relax, believing the world to be as safe as it seemed. As I sat on a bench, watching my daughter kick her tiny feet in delight, a blonde woman in an expensive-looking coat approached, her smile wide and her eyes locked onto my child with an unsettling intensity. "Oh my goodness, she is adorable," she gushed, leaning in closer than I liked, her manicured fingers reaching out as if she expected permission to touch my daughter without even asking. I instinctively pulled the stroller slightly back, offering a polite but firm smile as I responded with a simple, "Thank you." She laughed lightly, unfazed by my hesitation, and introduced herself as Karen, claiming she was just a lover of babies and had one of her own at home. Something about her demeanor put me on edge, but she continued chatting, asking question after question. How old was my baby? Where was the mother/father? Did I live nearby? I gave vague answers, shifting uncomfortably. Yet before I could think of a way to remove myself from the conversation, she pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of my daughter. "Oh, I'm just sending it to my husband. She looks so much like our little girl at that age." My stomach clenched. "Please don't take pictures of my child," I said, my voice sharper now, but she only laughed again, waving a dismissive hand as if I were overreacting. The unease in my gut grew into a churning storm, but before I could grab my daughter and leave, my phone rang. A quick glance revealed it was my sister calling, and as I reached into my pocket to silence it, my world shattered in the blink of an eye. When I looked back up, the stroller was empty. My heart stopped. My mind blanked. It was as if my body had forgotten how to function as I stared at the space where my baby had been just seconds ago. Then I heard it. A scream, but not from my child. Karen's voice pierced through the park, loud and hysterical. "Oh my God! Someone help! He's trying to steal my baby!" My head snapped in her direction, and there she was, clutching my daughter in her arms, shielding her from me as if I were the threat. The world around me seemed to tilt on its axis as onlookers gasped, some parents pulling their children closer, others already reaching for their phones. "That's my baby!" I shouted, my own voice trembling with rage and panic as I took a step forward. But Karen stumbled back, cradling my daughter protectively as if I were some kind of monster. "No, she's mine!" she shrieked, her eyes wild, her expression twisted with conviction so strong it sent shivers down my spine. People were staring, judging, whispering. The fear in Karen's voice was so convincing that a few bystanders hesitated, unsure of who to believe. My mind raced. Should I lunge for my baby? Should I call the police? Would anyone even believe me? Then, to my horror, a man in a security uniform rushed forward, placing himself between me and Karen, his hand hovering near his radio. "Sir, step away from the woman and her child," he ordered, his tone firm. "No!" I protested, pointing at my baby, who was now beginning to cry, her tiny arms reaching for me. "That's my daughter. She stole her from me." But Karen shook her head vigorously, tears streaming down her face, playing the role of a terrified mother so perfectly that even I felt trapped in her delusion. "No, no, please," she sobbed, clutching my baby tighter as she rocked her gently. "He's a stranger. I don't know him. Someone, please call the police." The security officer hesitated for only a second before reaching for his radio. "We have a possible child abduction at Maplewood Park," he reported, and the blood drained from my face as I realized how quickly the narrative had shifted. I was the kidnapper in their eyes. I could already hear the distant wail of sirens, but instead of relief, all I felt was sheer terror. I took another step forward, desperate, my hands trembling as I pleaded, "Look in the stroller. My diaper bag has her name on it. I have pictures of her on my phone. She's mine." But Karen let out another shriek, backing away as if I were lunging to attack. "Stay away from me," she screamed, her voice cracking. Her hysteria so real it made the crowd close in around me, forming a wall of suspicion and hostility. My daughter's cries became louder, her small, frightened wails slicing through my chest like knives. But no one would let me near her. The world was spinning out of control, and the worst part was, I had no idea how to stop it. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the chaos like a blade. And within moments, 2 police cars screeched to a halt near the park entrance, their flashing lights painting the scene in alternating hues of red and blue. Officers poured out, their hands hovering near their holsters as they assessed the situation, their eyes darting between me, the supposed aggressor, and Karen, who clutched my daughter like a mother shielding her child from danger. "Oh, thank God you're here," she cried, her voice shaking as she rushed toward one of the officers. "This man tried to steal my baby. He grabbed her from her stroller and ran. I barely got her back." Her words dripped with urgency, her crocodile tears convincing enough to make the surrounding onlookers nod in agreement. My throat tightened as I stepped forward, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. "That's a lie," I shouted, my voice breaking with sheer desperation. "I'm her father. This woman stole my child while I was sitting on that bench." I pointed toward the stroller, hoping, praying that someone, anyone, would check it and see the truth. But the officer nearest to me raised a hand, a clear warning not to advance. "Sir, stay where you are," he commanded, his face impassive, his stance rigid with authority. "Let's all calm down and talk this through." But how could I be calm when my daughter, my flesh and blood, was whimpering in the arms of a stranger who had crafted a lie so airtight that it was suffocating me? My mind spun, grasping for anything, any proof, any action, that could flip the script back in my favor. "Check my ID," I pleaded, fumbling to pull out my wallet with shaking hands. "Check my phone. I have hundreds of pictures of her. Look in the diaper bag. Her name is stitched into the fabric." But Karen was quicker. "Of course he has pictures," she scoffed, her tone laced with disgust. "I bet he's been stalking us for weeks, planning this. He probably stole pictures of my baby off social media." She turned to the officer, gripping his arm like a damsel in distress. "Please, just get him away from us. I need to get my baby home." "She's terrified." My daughter's wails filled the space between us, her small body writhing as she reached toward me. But Karen turned her away, bouncing her gently as if she were soothing a child she had raised since birth. I took a step forward, and that was my mistake. "Sir," I said, "stay back." The officer's voice was sharp now, his hand gripping the radio at his shoulder. "We need to verify everything before anyone goes anywhere." My stomach churned as Karen's face twisted in mock offense. "Verify what?" she demanded, clutching my baby tighter. "Why do I have to prove my own child is mine? While this kidnapper gets to act like he's the victim?" The crowd murmured, their collective opinion shifting further in her favor, and I felt the ground slipping out from beneath me. My world was cracking, splitting open, swallowing me whole. Then the officer turned to me. "Sir, do you have any proof that you are this child's parent?" he asked, his voice measured, neutral, but there was doubt in his eyes, a terrible, gut-wrenching doubt that made my blood run cold. "Yes," I exclaimed, holding out my phone. "Look, pictures, texts from the hospital. Her birth certificate is at home. Please, just let me call someone who can bring it." Karen let out a short, bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, come on," she spat. "Anyone can fake a few photos. He's probably one of those lunatics who thinks random kids belong to them. Or worse, he could be trafficking children." My breath hitched. The accusation was so heinous, so vile, that it stunned me into silence for a moment too long. The crowd's whispers grew, the tension thickening into something suffocating. "Let's take this downtown," one of the officers finally said, signaling to his partner. "We need statements. Both of you." My heart clenched. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. This was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "I am not leaving without my daughter," I growled, my entire body trembling with rage and helplessness. But the officer took a step closer, his hand resting on his belt, his expression warning me that resistance would only make things worse. And then Karen struck the final blow. "Fine," she said, sighing dramatically. "I understand you need to do your job. I'll go with you. But please, let me take my baby home first. She's exhausted. She needs to eat. She needs her bed." "And oh," I roared, pure terror slicing through me. "Do not let her leave with my child." My baby was still crying, her little arms reaching, begging for me, but Karen had buried her face in her shoulder now, rocking her as if she were soothing her baby instead of mine. The officer hesitated, but Karen's tired, teary act was winning. "Officer," she said, sniffling, "if he really was her father, don't you think she'd be reaching for him?" My entire world shattered. The doubt in the officer's eyes solidified. He sighed and looked back at me, his expression one of reluctant authority. "Sir, you need to calm down. You're not helping your case right now. Helping my? She stole my child." But no one was listening anymore. No one wanted to hear the desperation in my voice. "We'll sort this out at the station," the officer continued, nodding to his partner. "Take him in for questioning." The other officer grabbed my arm. Not roughly, not violently, but firmly enough that I knew what was happening. I was being detained for trying to rescue my own daughter. And as I was led toward the police car, hands shaking, heart thrashing in my chest, I saw Karen walking away with my child in her arms, smiling. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as I sat in the back of the police car, my mind spinning, my heart pounding against my ribcage like a wild animal trapped in a cage. My baby was gone, taken by a stranger while I was being treated like a criminal. Every breath felt like swallowing shards of glass. Every second that passed without my daughter in my arms felt like an eternity of suffering. The officers up front were speaking in hushed tones, but I barely heard them, my thoughts a chaotic storm of panic and fury. I had to think. I had to act. "Listen to me," I said, my voice strained but firm. "You have to stop her. If she leaves, if she gets too far, you might never find her again. You don't know who she is. She could be anyone." One of the officers sighed, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "We're handling it, sir," he said, though there was no urgency in his voice. "Let us do our job." Handling it? They had just let a woman walk away with my child based on nothing but her words. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. "Then do it faster," I snapped. "Call the hospital. Check the birth records. Check security cameras. Call my wife. She'll tell you everything." My pulse was hammering in my ears as I fought the sinking feeling in my gut, the terrible fear that Karen was already disappearing into the wind with my baby. But then, something changed. The radio crackled to life. A female dispatcher's voice came through, urgent. "Be advised. We have a potential suspect using falsified documents." My breath caught. The officer stiffened. "The suspect's name does not match any recent birth records in the state database." For the first time since this nightmare began, the officers looked at each other with something close to concern. One of them turned to me, his expression shifting slightly. "You said you had proof?" "Yes," I said quickly, my pulse racing. "My phone. Check my texts. I have messages from the hospital when she was born. Check my insurance. I've been paying for her doctor visits since day one." The officer hesitated for only a moment before opening the back door and pulling me out of the car. "If you're lying, this won't end well for you," he warned. But I barely heard him. I was already unlocking my phone with shaky fingers, scrolling through the endless photos of my daughter, the time-stamped ones from the delivery room, the videos of her taking her first steps. The officers leaned in, their expressions shifting from doubt to something graver. "Shit," one of them muttered under his breath. Then the radio crackled again. "We have a visual on the suspect. She's attempting to leave the park on foot." The next second was a blur. The officers were moving, their skepticism dissolving into action as they sprinted toward their cars. I ran after them, heart pounding in my chest, my legs moving on pure adrenaline. The fear clawing at my throat only grew sharper as I saw her, Karen, walking briskly toward the far exit, my baby still in her arms, her eyes darting around as if she was deciding which way to escape. "Stop her!" I roared, my voice tearing from my throat like an animal's cry. Karen turned, her face contorting into a mask of sheer panic as she saw the officers closing in. She clutched my daughter tighter, her lips moving rapidly as she whispered something to the baby. Words I couldn't hear, words I never wanted to know. Then she ran. The park, once filled with laughter and idle chatter, erupted into chaos. People gasped, children shrieked. Mothers clutched their own babies closer as they watched a woman, once thought to be a victim, sprint like a fugitive, dodging strollers, leaping over benches, her desperation dripping off her like sweat. My lungs burned as I chased after her, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. "Stop! Police!" one of the officers bellowed, their footsteps thundering behind me. But Karen didn't stop. She zigzagged between trees, her grip on my child shifting as she stumbled over an uneven patch of grass. My daughter's terrified wails cut through the air like a siren. "Please!" I shouted. "Don't hurt her!" I didn't know what Karen was thinking, what twisted logic had convinced her that she could claim a child that wasn't hers. But I knew desperation. And desperate people were dangerous. She was cornered now, backed up against the edge of the park where a short chain-link fence separated the grassy field from the street beyond. For a moment, she hesitated, her breaths ragged, her arms shaking. Then, just as I feared, she made a split-second decision. She climbed the fence. "No!" My scream ripped from my throat as I lunged forward, my hands reaching out, and then I saw it. The officer tackled her mid-climb, slamming her down to the ground with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. My daughter slipped from her grasp. Time slowed. My hands shot forward, catching my baby just before she hit the ground. My knees buckled as I cradled her against my chest, her small body shaking with sobs, her little fingers clinging to my shirt as if she knew, somehow, that she was finally safe. Tears burned my eyes, but I forced myself to look up. Karen was writhing beneath the officer, her screams wild and incoherent as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. "You don't understand," she shrieked. "She was meant to be mine." I stared at her, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "You stole my child," I whispered, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and exhaustion. "You kidnapped my daughter." Her eyes, once filled with false innocence, were now wide and manic, her lips trembling. "She looks just like my baby," she whispered, almost to herself. "Just like her. I lost her, and I saw your little girl and she had to be mine." The weight of her words crushed me. This wasn't just a random abduction. It was something worse, something deeply broken. The officers hauled her up, dragging her toward the squad car as she thrashed, screaming about how I was the one stealing her baby. But I didn't care anymore. I had my daughter in my arms, and she was safe. The media frenzy that followed was a whirlwind. News stations swarmed the park, reporters demanding statements, trying to paint Karen as either a crazed criminal or a tragic figure consumed by grief. But none of it mattered to me. The only thing that mattered was holding my daughter and never letting her go again. Karen was charged with attempted kidnapping, child endangerment, and falsifying legal documents. The judge denied her bail. But even as she was dragged away, her final words haunted me. "She was meant to be mine." I held my daughter closer. "No," I whispered. "She was always mine."